Alright everybody, welcome to this, another episode of Free Kick On Air, our live and unedited podcast. We do live on Twitter each and every week that we're available, and this week for round 6, starting off the pod, you've got me, Liam, as your host, and then you've also got Bailey from AFL Fantasy Fanatics. Bales, how you going?
Good, thanks, mate. Looking forward to another week of AFLW and AFLW Fantasy. It's good, but also part of me's sad because we're already halfway through the season. We're into the back half of the year. It goes way too quick, and I know that Kate Sermon was on an article. I think Will shared it as well, saying that she obviously they'd like to see the season go a bit longer. So, as fantasy coach, I'm sure we'd all like that as well. But at the moment, we've only got 5 weeks to go. So, gearing up. How are you, mate?
Yeah, look, not too bad. I was actually better for not having thought about the length of the season being as short as it is, because it just gets more and more frustrating the longer you think about it.
Yeah.
And just separately, as a kind of call to action, anyone that is able to go to games, it's an absurd situation where, you know, the seasons will be lengthened on the basis of higher attendance at games, which I just find quite ludicrous, to be honest. But you know, in the event of that being the case, if you can get to games, try and get to them, because it'll only mean more fantasy games kind of in the years to come. So, at the very least, if you... Yeah, go.
And it's real fun. I was going to say, it's good fun as well. Like, I was there last week, if you guys were tuning at the start of the space, when we were just chatting before, that it's just good. You just get to sort of... It's just so good to go to a game, and then because it's different with the men's, they'll sort of... Because so many people, they'll sort of go off and whatever, whereas the girls straight after the game, they'll go around, they'll take photos, they'll sign like stuff, and obviously I got my photo of Marinoff on the weekend, which was fantastic. So guys, you can get photos and stuff with them most of the time after the game. So it's just another incentive to get down and support the girls, because that's one of the ways that the game gets bigger.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, obviously it's easier to appreciate the quality of some players when you're there live. Well, we'll use that as our nice little launching point into the first live game of the week. We've got the Western Bulldogs and Carlton at Whitten Oval at a normal hour for the first game of the round at 7:15 on Friday night. In the ins and outs, we've got a huge out after a very short in period. We've got Karen Peterson out for Carlton. We've got Jen Lawson-Tavern coming back from her. I'm going to call it quite ludicrous 2-week suspension for one of the more innocuous, dangerous tackles I've seen in AFL M or W this year. And then for the Dogs, it's Millie Brown and Elizabeth Snell coming in for Dom Carruthers and Heidi Woodley. Now, unfortunately, this is now with a lot of people having traded out Cordner and Pound in last week, given the re-arrival of Peterson. This now becomes a kind of slightly diminished in importance fantasy game. Unless Bales, you've still got any of them.
No, so I'd never had Gab Pound, and I traded Cordner last week to Tanya Kennedy, which actually worked out pretty well for me. She looked pretty good. So I think if you've still got Cordner, I think that there's not really any defenders that are crying out like pick me, because like besides probably like your Hannah Priest and maybe Emma Kane, a couple at the top, because a lot of them can score well and then score poorly. If you go Gab Pound to someone, it might only be within 10 points, 15 points of each other. So it's probably worthwhile going if you've got other issues like Phillips, Davey, issues like that. I think you're going to gain more points by doing that. So if I've got Cordner, I'd probably be holding in. I think the Bulldogs are a decent matchup for defenders.
That's a great question. I will pull up the scale of hardness. So the Bulldogs they're pretty good. They're kind of within the top third of teams. So that's probably a good point. In terms of I think you can keep both of them. And I'm also of the mind that unless you can kind of do it with less than maybe say 150k, I think trying to jump up to Hannah Priest is a potential mega risk, because I think once you go above that amount of cash, you're either getting someone who can kind of average 100 plus, and in my mind, that's basically the midfielders, and then Hoare or Too Good, basically. Too Good and Morrison. as being those kind of players that are able to average it that much that not everyone has in their sides. Whereas I think it's highly possible that Hannah Priest comes out with a 60 this week, particularly in the event where she won't have a player to tag in this game, and that's really important.
Yeah, and if you look at her scores, like she's been fantastic. I jumped on her 2 weeks ago and got a 65, which is decent for a defender. We know that defenders are scoring a bit lower than she got the 120 last week, but before that she 85, 66, 77. So she's been a little bit high, but in and around the marks of your Emma Carneys and like even Charlotte Thomas last few weeks. Like they've been getting anywhere from 65 to 85 as their scores. So that big 120, I think people are probably just going, you've got to have her in. But I think there's probably if you can save maybe a little bit of cash there and use that cash elsewhere to get a better player, then I think that could be a play.
Yeah, because I think the important thing to note here is that Hannah Priest is now priced at 90. So, yeah, I think the Carlton is an easy matchup for midfielders, but I also don't think that Hannah Priest is a kind of traditional midfielder. She was, in my mind, to some degree, being drawn to the ball by Ellie Blackburn because Ellie Blackburn just has almost no other competition inside that Western Bulldogs midfield, at least for kind of experience. So I'm not necessarily predicting a low score for Priest this week. I'm not expecting like 40s or 50s, but if you are, bringing her in this week, I wouldn't be expecting, 100 plus again this week.
Yeah, I think I agree. But she has obviously shown that she's got that ceiling and that clear number one defender. So I guess if you've got no issues and you've got that spare cash free, then I think you can potentially launch into. Well, I was just seeing Will's popped in, so I know he'll be saying that just got to get Priest in because I know Priest's one of his favourites.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if I can actually get him on board. Well, whilst we move straight on from Hannah Priest, as Will has now joined, we're going to talk for a quick second about Ellie Blackburn because she's someone who's been in more people's trade plans this week, and I can definitely understand why. She's coming off, I think it might be her best score of all time, which, great. I think, and as well, the Western Bulldogs, if off the top of my head, I actually think they've got a good upcoming run. It's more that it's just not bad. They've got kind of
Carlton,
two slight red matchups and then 3 light green or green matchups.
Yeah, Carlton, Adelaide, Sydney, and West Coast. I'm a fan. A few people have sort of poo-pooed the idea of bringing Blackburn in, but I think it's a good option. I don't know necessarily if there's going to be too many hard tags. Like there's no single, no Meg McDonald, no Kathy Svark in the next few. So I think that she can put up solid scores, and she's probably got a lower break even after that 117. So she can at least be a stopgap for maybe a fortnight, maybe 3 weeks to maybe make 100k, maybe 200, depending on how big she scores. And then you can maybe go across to a Garner if you don't have a Marinoff, a Riddell, Hatchard, Rowbottom, one of those top mids. Even Ali Anderson after that single tag could be an option as well. So I think it could be a decent play.
It could be a decent play. I think the reason why I'm a little bit hesitant is that is by far and away her best score, and otherwise her market share is relatively low. I think she's at that 9% mark, which is good in the context of fantasy. I just think that
you want a bit more.
You do definitely want a bit more. Hang on, I'm just going to pull up what it was for the Western Bulldogs game. So she had that massive score. It was only 9.5% market share, and she's averaging 8 for the year, which I think combined to speak to a St Kilda. That matchup against St Kilda was extremely high scoring, and that doesn't exactly fill me with the same confidence. Will, I'll invite you to join to speak for the first time. What are your thoughts on Ellie Blackburn as a potential trade-in target at that kind of below $1.1 million mark?
Yeah, g'day everyone. Firstly, I'd like to say I came in at the perfect time talking about that. I'm very happy with that. But yeah, in terms of Ellie Blackburn, you were close, Liam. It was actually a third highest ever score, but interestingly, it was the first time she's ever had over 30 disposals. So she's in good form regardless.
Most disposals ever.
Yeah, most disposals. I think the thing about Blackburn is, I think Bailey nailed it on the head. Where I don't think Blackburn's going to be a major tag target. Where I think the Bulldogs just simply aren't good enough at the moment to really warrant it. The 61 and the 77 aren't fantastic, but as you said, she's got a decent run. I think if you are looking for a stepping stone player, which I think you alluded to, Liam, I think it's actually quite a good option. It's like if you don't have the money to take, say, a T. Smith all the way up to one of the Uber premiums, probably a good one to just drop a couple of hundred on top of, and maybe you'll be able to get there in a couple of weeks.
You would hope so, and I also think that as much as I think the really important thing to mention here is that I don't think we can undersell how bad the kind of word is coming out of the Bulldogs this week with those comments from Nathan Burke and media reports suggesting that there was an extra long discussion after the game on the weekend. I can't imagine that. I think there's one of two options. It's either this game against Carlton is a true show of the best the Bulldogs can offer, and the kind of lowest low of that losses against St Kilda kind of propels them forward. And I definitely think that at times when Blackburn has scored poorly as a fantasy player, it's come because she is the only player in there who's able to make a major difference at stoppages, and she just gets overwhelmed and is unable to get first possessions and kind of do much in the game. I also think there's an entire possibility that that the talk from Berkey this week is a sign that there's a lost playing group, and that could completely tank everyone's scoring, and they could become even more of a pushover. So I think there is some risk in that respect. And in terms of whether or not she will get tagged per se, I don't think so, but she is by far and away their most accomplished midfielder. So I think stoppage attention is kind of almost guaranteed game to game. And that's kind of borne true for the last few years.
Yeah, well,
I think.
Oh, sorry, Will. I was just going to say, well, to you boys, what do you think? Because a lot of people, myself included, are looking at Ellie Blackburn or Abby Dowrick. I've currently got Dowrick. The more and more I think about it, is that where we would go if we're choosing between the two?
I prefer Dowrick.
I personally prefer Blackburn if you're going for a intermediate option. I think that Blackburn's probably a player that I think could have a run of 2-3 good games. Dowrick, to me, is a player who is at some stage going to be one of those players that you want in, and I mean this in a long-term sense. I just want to see the consistency from Dowrick. That could start next week. So it's a risk either way, but personally, I would go Blackburn.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be pretty close.
Yeah, and I think something else I just want to say about Ellie Blackburn is that previously we've seen that Kirsty Lamb's been a bit undercooked this season, has been spending a lot of time up forward. As of last week, we saw her actually be a bit more in the midfield, inside the stoppages a bit more, and that caused a season high of 91 for her. And I think her coming back into full fitness really helps Blackburn by just having that other bigger body in at the stoppages to give Blackburn a bit of protection. So that's one other thing that I have in Blackburn's favour. I still don't think it means Blackburn's going to suddenly score 117 every week, but I think it is a point in Blackburn's favour for me.
Yeah, interestingly, it was only 11% CBAs for Kirsty Lamb this week. And the real beneficiary this week was Belle Pritchard, who, for anyone who's going to continue playing on, as I expect all of you should, Belle Pritchard is a name to have in your black book. She's a 178-centimetre midfielder who has taken a little bit of time to see that ceiling, but she looked really, really good on the weekend.
Option?
Not an option. Like too much chance of a 50, if you ask me. And she's already a little bit expensive because she's averaged, I think 70 to this point. I'll need to get up her stats.
Yeah, 79.
I think she's a name to have in your black book for next season because she's kind of that breakout candidate. She's improved every year, and I think she's a future gun.
Yeah.
Well, we've now spent a little bit longer on the first game than I originally intended, but we'll move along then nice and quickly to a game without many changes whatsoever because we've got GWS and West Coast out at Blacktown at 1:05 on Saturday afternoon. And the only change in this game is we've got Miller out for the Suns and in comes Renee Karras which is
that would be the Giants, Liam.
The Giants, yes. For whatever reason, I always mix those two up when I'm speaking. So that's Renee Karras, the ruck, coming in, which is interesting. In terms of what that does for the teams, I really don't think it matters too much. It might be that if anyone is looking at Cambridge McCormick as a trade in, as a effectively basement price player, I don't know if I'd be doing that. I don't see her CBAs lasting.
I think with McCormick, it's likely that if she is going to get more time on ground, it'll be in that half earlier in the season. And against West Coast, that
was
probably not
well.
the best role to begin with, let alone against West Coast. So, I'd be probably steering clear of McCormick there. I think, Karras basically just comes in as some extra ruck coverage. It's probably not surprising that Fleur Davies is starting to tire a little bit as the season goes on. So they brought...
I think she was tired to begin with, to be honest. Her time on ground's never been particularly high.
Yeah.
It really is someone who looks like they can physically dominate in years to come, but needs to kind of potentially work. And you can kind of see those kind of players where they are getting a little bit more tired, and it comes down to like giving away silly small free kicks kind of just by being late at times. But in terms of the biggest story from this game, and I'm going to get you both to predict, we've got two sets of taggers, and we really need to know what's going to happen. So we've got Elise Parker as the main tag target for GWS, and then you've got Emma Swanson as the tag target for the Eagles. And interestingly as well, Haneen Zarika has been named on the ball as a follower. If you were going to predict who's going to get the hardest tag out of Swanson and Parker this week, who would you say it is? I'll throw to you, Will, first.
Personally, I think Parker. Swanson, to me, isn't the sort of player that I think desperately needs a tag, because most of her work for the Eagles is actually her defensive work. It's the running backwards to help with the defense, tackle and around the ball. Like, she's a fantastic player, Swanson, but she's not exactly what I would call like the explosive player like Parker. And I think with this being a very winnable game for the Giants, who haven't won a game yet, I think they will be looking to a player like Elise Parker to have a big game to get them over the line. So if I were over at West Coast, I'd be putting a fair bit of time into Elise Parker this week.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I've got some thoughts as well, but yeah, Bales.
I was going to say, I think Elise Parker's the clear sort of one that's got the danger of the tag, and I think that she could be held to a bit of a lower score, but I still think she's a good option to be bringing in, especially with that good run coming up. And she's been tagged in the past. She can still find a way to get a solid score. But no, just the other thing with mentioning taggers for you, chat about it, Liam, as well. One of the taggers not playing this game for Giants, Lister, how can it not be reported before the teams were announced that she's out for, I think it was 8 weeks or something with an injury? Like, that's just, it's ridiculous. The injury reporting is not really the best.
It's really not good at all. And it's almost like I've had to put it in the rearview mirror because I've been too frustrated by it. In terms of what I think, I agree that Elise Parker is the more important tag threat. Here's going to be my issue. I think that the Giants are going to look at what Gold Coast did to Swanson and say, we want a piece of that action, because they completely shut out Swanson from the game for the majority. And as much as I agree that Swanson works back, she often works back into the back line as a marking target as they try and get out. And now that's obviously a lot harder when you are copping attention around the ground. And we saw that Haneen Zarika was very good at that against North and Jazz Garner. Here's the problem. I think that Emma Swanson is also the best tagger at West Coast. And if you're going to pick someone that would follow around Elise Parker, it would be Emma Swanson. Are we going to end up with this kind of daisy-chained tagging line going around the ground? Or is it going to be something where the sides are going to have to make some pretty drastic changes during the game to kind of drop tags? Because if you ask me, in the event that kind of you see Swanson try and get tagged by Zarika and then Swanson is trying to tag Parker, you're kind of in this weird situation where all the midfield work needs to be done by Bella Lewis, and I don't know if West Coast would want to be relying on that for most of the game.
I actually think you're missing a big name who I think is actually probably the biggest, well, I would say would be the biggest tag target if I was targeting a player as GWS, and that is Ella Roberts.
I was going to say that before, yeah.
But so I agree that, but she's not so much a tag target because she's already playing a majority off the half forward line. And so she just has someone that is told you are just like sticking to her like glue. And to be honest, her impact is massively muted by the fact that West Coast coming out of defence sometimes cannot hit a kick to save themselves. Like half the time it's just like punt it somewhere near Ella and hope she can take a mark. And even then, sometimes she'll be wide open right there for a mark on the wing, and they short arm it, kick it inside, whatever you want, and they are crap. Like, as much as I think that, yes, Ella Roberts is highly talented and needs lots of attention, I don't think she so much gets a tag as just teams will game plan to make sure that there's someone who's able to run with her. So, we're kind of left in a situation where I don't think whatever tagging type situation we see at the first CBA in the first quarter, my prediction is there is 0% chance it is similar at the end of the game because of what these two sides are going to do and the willingness to kind of change up who's tagging who.
I think it's an interesting one, and the tagging's always an interesting one for teams down the bottom because it's always interesting how much impact they can actually have. So I think it'll be an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, 100%. And unfortunately, what we've given you there is some extra information, but also probably some extra reasons to stress about trading in Elise Parker this week. And don't worry, I'm in the same spot. That's why I've kind of thought about the fact she is the tag target and then what it will do to the rest of the midfield structure. And now, Will, I think you may have missed this discussion, but Bales, you and I are now about to chat again about Melbourne and Adelaide out at Casey Fields. In terms of the ins and outs, we've got the biggest out of the week, and that's Paxi Paxman is out for Melbourne alongside George Campbell and Taylor Harris and Megan Fitzsimon are coming in. And then for Adelaide, interestingly, it's two defenders back for the Crows with Stevie Lee Thompson and Najwa Allen coming in. And then out is the in and out Montana McKinnon. And then also one I'm very surprised to see get dropped in Brooke Tonnen, the defender, who has been omitted.
It's been solid. I'm surprised she got dropped.
I'm very surprised that she got dropped, particularly in a world where I still would say that the Crows are not replete with their full kind of lineup of defenders. I don't think necessarily that if you look at their defence, I don't know, if you ask me, I think I would be picking Brooke Tonnen over Jess Waterhouse, for example.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think that because Waterhouse brings a little bit, I guess, to the forward line, sort of that speed and sort of a different forward. So that might be why. But yeah, I do agree. But it's going to be a very interesting game. But I think that probably the one with the extra couple of defenders coming in, does that make Randall an option now?
It makes Randall more must-see television than she was before. I cannot in good faith jump at it. It's too risky and concerning. I think it's something that we're all going to have to keep our eyes on. The fact that they're going up against Melbourne, which is not an easy matchup, also doesn't fill me with, belief that it's good. It's basically the third hardest matchup for midfielders, so not an ideal place to start.
Yeah,
going forward, though, I definitely think it's something we've got to keep an eye on.
Yeah, because
cheap.
Part of me thinks that she might go more into the midfield this week just because of how big the game is, and if they need her in defence or up forward, then that's where she'd go. I've just looked at it because going Erin Phillips up is tough because it's she's down at 6.79.
She's cheap.
There's not much else around her. So part of me is just like, do I just throw a dart at Chelsea Randall knowing what she's capable of and just get off the Erin Phillips roller coaster that's sort of gone way off the rails the last few weeks? So that's probably why I bring it up. And I think a few people are in that boat because cash gen it's not there. Unless you have Ty Smith on your bench and you were lucky enough to sort of stick fat with her on the bench and you had a sort of full midfield and you can go her down and get 600 odd K or whatever 500K would be. Most people have got like Caitlin Pope, like a basement ruck, basement forward, maybe even another basement defender as well. So we don't have much cash. So it's like maybe he's going Phillips to Randall, a potential play. But yeah,
it's an interesting play, and if you really are strapped for cash, there aren't often players with that higher pedigree that you can pick. And I would say outside of one round this year, or maybe one or two rounds, I think Randall has probably outscored Phillips. Rather depressingly.
It'd be, I think, 2 weeks. Yeah, week 1 and week 3, I think, are the only 2 weeks.
So it's a name to keep an eye on. And if you really are strapped for cash, I'm not going to talk you down from it. I think it's a definite possibility. And I've already talked about the fact that Randall is more of a watch when Adelaide do hit harder sides and towards the back end of the year when results matter more. She's the one who they often lean on for kind of match-winning performances. Will, are you similarly on board with a more increased watch of Chelsea?
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea Randall's one of those players that is literally a week-to-week proposition now, because if she suddenly gets the role that she had last year, cheapest, easiest bargain pick you're going to get. But until it happens, much like you said as well, Liam, I'm just not willing to risk it. Yeah. So, yeah, it's literally possibly my greatest watch and wait for the season on this one.
Yeah, it's kind of a watch and wait that we've had all year. It was something that, I was tweeting about back, 2 weeks before the season started, which was, defenders are out for Adelaide. No, don't pick Chelsea Randall. Impliedly, once they come back, yeah, she's a potential option.
Yeah, and the other thing quickly just to note as well is that Tia Charlton's had a very strong year as that third midfielder next to Hatchard and Marinoff. So there's probably not, I guess, a need for her to go in there. And also, Ballard's been pretty good in the midfield. So it's not like last year where Tia Charlton was still sort of working her way into sort of that sort of real strong rotation for the Crows. So yeah, just something to keep an eye on as well with Randall. But Sarah Allen is only a couple of weeks away, hopefully. So that might be another big thing to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd be hoping she's back for the Brisbane game in round 8. Yeah. In terms of what's happening on at Melbourne, we've kind of seen that losing Paxi Paxman for a game didn't do much to affect them in that round 2 matchup against GWS Bales. I think Kate Hoare had a particularly good game that week. I can't remember if you remember her score.
Yeah, let's not speak about that.
Yeah, sorry, it was quite unfair of me.
I didn't even watch it. I refused to watch it. I couldn't bear myself to watch that. That was, one of the biggest blunders I've made in any fantasy sport, I reckon.
Yeah, well, not knowingly, that's one of the best fantasy quarters of all time. At least, you can kind of join me in the Abic Dowrick club then. In terms of what this is actually going to do for their structure, I don't think it's going to change much, but I do think that if there is a week, if you're looking to upgrade an F5 and you don't have Kate Hoare already, I think this is a great time to launch. Will, you are already an owner.
Yep.
Do you feel like lending her to me this week? That'd be lovely.
I mean, I would like to say that I told you to start with her at the start of the season, as I did, and you're a bit unsure about the Melbourne mid forwards in particular. I think you went with Paxi as your pick of the lot.
Yes.
So I'm going to let you hold on to Paxi for this week, and I'll keep Kate Hoare.
I don't have Paxi.
I'm more meant as the. You don't have Paxi, but neither does Melbourne, so it kind of works.
How about me, Will? Yeah. I started with Kate Hoare, so I was on the bandwagon, mate. Lend her to me.
I am proud of you, Bales. I don't need to lend it to you. Have you traded her out?
Oh dear.
No comment.
I've just put together what's happened here because I missed that bit of knowledge, so I apologise for that one, Bales.
No.
I would lend it to you, but it was your fault for trying.
Just long story short, if anyone did miss it, was to upgrade Bree Davey, get her on field up from Ty Smith after round 1, and I needed to cull someone up there, and I could have gone Phillips or Roberts down. Instead, I thought Kate Hall had one huge corner in round one. That was half her score. I'll go her just because she's the most expensive. And, I saw an 84-point core in round one. And, the first quarter. And, I've been scarred ever since.
See, I actually think the bigger travesty there was trading out T. Smith in the first round. I was staggered that everyone wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I think, Will, you came armed with extra experience having watched her be that not all Australian rising star. And let's just use that as a perfect launching point to talk about St Kilda versus Hawthorn at RSEA Park on Saturday afternoon. In terms of the ins and outs, who have we got? We've got Nikki Xenos out, suspended, and in comes Rosie Dillon for her first game of the year. And then Hawthorn have omitted Sophie Locke and brought back in from concussion Mackenzie Eardley. We've already had a bit of a discussion about Hannah Priest and what she means. Do you think... Yes. My expectation in this instance is that Priest is probably going to be tagging Bates. I think, do we all agree that's the most likely outcome here?
Yeah, I think so. And the good thing about Priest is it's not a hard tag. It's more a run with role. So it doesn't... What I found with watching a fair bit of Hannah Priest is it basically just means she gets around the ball a lot while not terribly affecting the other midfielder in terms of scoring. So it's perfect for everyone.
Yeah, because she tagged Jazz Garner in round one for 122. And then she tagged Ellie Blackburn to 120. She just allows herself... She just allows that other kind of elite primo midfielder to be, a guiding light towards the best bit of the stoppage. And then just kind of tackles and gets some possessions. And, in terms of a way to score fantasy points, it's not bad. For the rest of the game, though, I don't know necessarily if many people are packing Hawthorn players in their side at the moment. But interestingly, there probably are a lot of people who have Tiana Smith now at M5 and are thinking whether or not this is the week to launch and remove her, and I'm certainly in that position, and I've certainly seen a few questions out there about it as well. If you were going to predict what Tiana Smith was going to score this week against Hawthorn, who are an easy matchup and also who love a game of competitive tackle football, because, Beck Goddard cut her teeth in seasons 1 and 2 as a premiership coach and bringing back a bit of that pressure action in season 8, how do we reckon Tiana Smith is going to go? Bales, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I reckon about 85. I've got her on field as my M5 as well. And, I just think that it could be a matchup where Hawthorn like to play that sort of contested style of footy. And I think that could be good for Ty Smith, sort of quick possessions out of the contest and racking up those tackles. So, 64 last week, a little bit down from the previous 3 weeks. But I think that she can bounce back a little bit and go at least 75. I think anywhere, from 75 to 90, and I think 85 is sort of the number I had in my head when you asked me the question. So I'll go with that.
Not bad.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I'd be fairly comfortable with keeping T. Smith on the field. I did trade her out last week, but I think she's got probably another game, maybe 2, of making a bit of money if you do have a few other things that you need to fix up and you want to keep her till you can really cash in on it. So I think somewhere between a 70 and a 90 is probably the range.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Interestingly, her break-even is 76.5. So it's at that situation where if she scores an 80, she's only going to make you 10K. So I think if you are keeping her, you would want to be thinking about both her run kind of in the next game next week. And they've got GWS, which is, again, not a bad matchup for her. Again, that's another side that, St Kilda may be actually able to get a win, but also another side that likes that kind of tackle-heavy match. And then additionally, you either have to think that you're going to keep her or have a kind of an exit strategy or at least some target players that you think might be attainable next week, because it's going to be difficult to take someone like her up at, say, 860, 870K up to even a 1.1K slightly fallen premium midfielder. Anyone kind of considering otherwise holding her longer, or is it a hold if you've got some kind of exit strategy?
I've traded her out, so it's much of a muchness for me. But yeah, I'd probably say this is probably the week where she's going to hit that ceiling on her price unless she has a one out of the box. So I think you can hold her this week, but I'd be looking to move her on soon.
Yeah, I've looked at trading her just because, again, I could go maybe Phillips up to like a D Berry or someone around that price, or I could go Ty Smith to a Jenna Bruton or someone in that, or even a Belle Dawes or whatever. So part of me's tempted where I'm probably going to get more cash gen from that midfielder. So it's like, but then again, do I really want to hold Aaron Phillips over Ty Smith? That's the sort of question I'll ask myself. But I think if you can get off Ty Smith, I think that you could do it to get, if you can go like to a Dowrick or something, I think that's a good move if you can get up there, or even a Blackburn. But if you can't, as Will said, I think you can hold her for another week, potentially two, and hopefully she can pop out a 90, 95 and make you a little bit more cash.
Yeah, I agree. Right, well, let's unless there's any other players you want to discuss from that, let's move along to Port Adelaide and the Sydney Swans at Alberton Oval. The ins and outs, we've got Jade Anthony and Alice Mitchell coming in, and then Julie O'Sullivan and Brooke Lachlan injured out. And then, well, actually, gee whiz, there's so many players out for Port Adelaide. Out Maria Maloney, Jade DeMello, and Jade Halfpenny. And then coming in are Latonya Cockatoo Motlap, Ash Saint, and Sachi Syme. In terms of the ins and outs that really have an impact here, I think Maria Maloney out for personal reason is the one that is most kind of fantasy impactful. It's a situation where, in kind of both of your eyes, does that improve the prospects of an Abby Dowrick coming off her best performance of the week as a trade-in target?
Yeah, it's one of those ones for me that if they're against a stronger opposition, could go either way. It means Dowrick could cop a bit more attention, or it means she's more of the main focus. Against the Swans, who have a pretty standard sort of midfield operation, I don't think it's going to have a huge amount of impact scoring-wise, but I think it could change the roles of a few players around Dowrick, which might be actually more important for Dowrick, if that makes sense.
Yep. I think that Maria Maloney is a similar style of player to Dowrick, would be the kind of main thing. And in terms of what Sydney do in their midfield, you know, they've named Lucy McAvoy, Laura Gardner, and Montana Ham, which if you'd named that round one, I might have believed you, but we've not seen much to that effect so far this year. I would suggest that I would be surprised if this is the game where we see a strong tag on Abby Dowrick. I would expect this is the kind of game where we might see maybe some higher CBAs for Chloe Malloy to try and get her back into some form, or at least a more concerted game plan to kind of maximise her after a down couple of weeks. I'm of the mind that, you know, Dowrick is someone who I expect to go big this week. She's a high tackle player. Sydney have shown that they also like contested high tackle games, and she's kind of got a unique talent in that Port Adelaide side, and she's got a massive kick from that midfield as well. And so I expect her to be over 100 this week. And interestingly enough, her market share over each of the last 3 weeks, if you average it, would be basically 10%, which, if you have a look at the market share percentages of kind of players across the entire comp, there's maybe half a dozen players who can go above 10% market share. So I'm very hot on the idea of bringing in Dowrick this week. Either of you guys trading her in? Bales, I know you were talking about tossing up between her and Blackburn.
Yeah, at this stage I'm going Dowrick over her, and just a few factors like there's only one poor score in here below 86, which was against Brisbane being 51, and the two easier matchups being St Kilda and West Coast, she's gone above 90 both of them. The other ones, Geelong 86, the Crows 87 in round one, then obviously the Brisbane poor score. So in the easy opposition she's been able to get above that 90 mark, and I expect to do it again. And if you look at her time on ground as well, it's actually gone up each of the last 4 weeks. She was a low 70% against Brisbane, then 79, 82, and then 84. So she's obviously increasing game time. She's playing easier opposition. So I expect her to put up a big score. And this is not to rub salt in Liam. Did she? Was it Sydney that she had the big score last year? Yeah. So
yes,
I think that I think that she can put up a pretty similar score once again, and there's more game time, so she could even go even bigger. And I hope she does for you, Len. I really do.
Only if I bring her in. Only if I bring. Otherwise, I want like 10.
We for those who've actually listened to our podcast this week, we discussed it that the Cosmic Footy Karma is going to do something this week with Abby Dowrick. She's either going to score 150 or sub 50. We don't know which one yet, all depending on whether Liam brings her in or not.
Yeah, great. Right, so the weight of one of the most traded in players this week is on my shoulders. This is really filling me with much joy because at the moment she's my kind of trade up target for Tiana Smith if I do go that way. Because I'm also looking at trading up Britt Benici this week, but we're going to talk about that matchup a little bit later. So that kind of covers off on the main player in that game. Yeah, Bales?
I was just going to say one player I just want to quick discuss before we go to the next one. We got to talk about Erin Phillips because I'm trying to hold on to any hope whatsoever just so I can probably do an upgrade that I want to do. Ash Saint's back. There's no Maria Maloney, so that would tend to think that means that Erin Phillips is going to play majority midfield. Is there a world where we can hold her again this week, or do we just have to abort ship and just get whoever really that you can get in? Because I don't know if I'm sold on the players under 800k like your Debras. We talked about the West Bulldogs before, and even like a Randall and Kaufman and players like that. So is there a world where we can hold Phillips?
Well, I'll throw to you first. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. It's a tough one because Phillips has been underwhelming, but if there's ever a matchup where she could go, not even just big, but just at least well, it's against Sydney when there's a midfield spot up for grabs. And I think you can. The problem here is I think you definitely can hold Phillips. I think the logic with it is sound, but you could come to the end of that game going, gee, why did I hold Phillips? And with hindsight being 2020, of course, because we just don't really know how she's going to go, whatever role she's playing at the moment. Even if she is playing that midfield, she's had a few down games as well. So I think you certainly can hold Phillips. And I think that if there were ever a time to hold Phillips, now is probably that time with this matchup, if you hadn't got rid of her already.
See, I'm of the opinion that if you were to kind of look at the narrative on her role kind of and who she's playing against in a vacuum, you could make the argument that she's there to keep. Watching that game against West Coast, and I'd watched her for the few weeks prior, she has looked tired and has not gone in for tackles, not been taking marks. Port Adelaide haven't been looking for her for marks either. And, you know, as much as Port Adelaide have at times this year looked all right, they just got beaten by West Coast, who hadn't won a game in a year. I do not think that you can keep Erin Phillips. She's looked just not willing to kind of put in the effort to kind of see big fantasy scores. You know, she still gets her possessions every now and then, and it was true in that game against St Kilda. She basically didn't lay a single tackle until the final couple of minutes. I'm just of the mind that she just looks exhausted. She's not covering the ground. She's not getting to tackles or quick possessions at stoppages. She's getting the CBAs. That's not her problem. She's just not getting around the ground to score enough points. And so as much as, yes, it's possible she can score all right this week, she still had a 71% CBAs last week for a score that started with a 3. It was a rough watch. And that also, that was a lucky 30-odd. Like, it could have been a whole lot worse.
I guess a question here is a player to watch. A player who we talked a lot about pre-season who hasn't really quite come on as we thought. Hannah Ewings, the rising star. Could she be a player that moves into that midfield in the absence of Maloney?
It's possible. It's just a situation where if she's not in the midfield, she's not going to score well.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of a stab on a... And I think that's... Yeah, go.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think that's the thing. This is, if she's in there this week on the back of Maloney being out, it's a next week move. I think you'd be very, very speculative to do it this week. But I'm just sort of putting it as one to keep your eye on because she's a player that could greatly benefit from Maloney going out if she does get the midfield time that we thought she was going to get this year.
Yeah, I think this if you were to trade her in this week, it's a move where you get caught in that classic fantasy fallacy, which is you coach the team that your players play in. And if you ask me who I think should be in the midfield, I would absolutely have Hannah Ewings on that list for Port Adelaide because she looked excellent last year. And even if it was playing like more of a 60-40 split forward midfield, kind of that Kate Hoare kind of role, so to speak, I still think that would be a far better use of Ewing's talents than just having her sit in forward 50 most of the game. But we're not the coach. We don't get the ability to do that. And yeah, I think it's one you kind of throw in your book, wait to see anything, wait to hear some more news on what's going on with Maloney and whether or not we can expect her back anytime soon. And if we hear enough, I think she's, for people that are cash-strapped, probably going to be an absolute gift because she's going to be really cheap. Because this week she's 649k. So you gain some cash if you go from Phillips. So I think it's definitely, you're right, Will, there. That's a good one to keep in your back pocket. Moving along then to another great game. We've got Brisbane against Collingwood. It's the first night game for Brisbane this year. And with the ins and outs, we've got Poppy Bolts and Jade Ellinger omitted. We'll get to more about that later. And then in Christian Wenland and Annalie McKee. And then for Collingwood, it's Eliza James is coming in, and we've got Smith going out. So we've got Emily Smith going out. So what is going on with Jade Ellinger? Will, yeah, I know
that absolutely
one truly shocked me when I saw that.
I really don't know, to be honest. I was pretty shocked as well. I saw it and went, okay. And then I saw it was omitted, not injured. I was like, I've got very little answer to that one. That one's completely come from left field for me.
One of the most surprising omissions, because she is someone that has come with high raps for her skills and her speed and her movement off halfback and the wing for at least 3 seasons.
Yeah, she's been a staple of that halfback line for the Lions for a fair while. And
it's always been like, she's got more talent too. Like, she's just hitting her stride.
And like, I can't say I watched that Brisbane Hawthorn game, but I mean, I'd be surprised if, her game was that horrendous that she surrenders a spot to, one of the two players that come in.
Wendland.
Yeah, they've got a debutante and a player who's played just a handful of games. So, yeah, that one very out of left field for me.
Yeah, exactly. And particularly when the whole thing with Brisbane is they were actually struggling to keep some of their more experienced players kind of in the squad. I'm truly shocked by this. As for its fantasy impact, look, she might have been a name for us to consider if she'd been named as a defender, but as a midfielder, it doesn't mean too much. Interestingly,
this space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
Fortunately for any Nat Grider holders, Shannon Campbell has been named back as a defender this week. Do you think that Jade Ellinger going back signals some kind of change in the defensive structure for Brisbane? And do we think that means that, Nat Grider is it, an important trade out, or is it just a hold and a wait and see?
Yeah, it's a tough one because they're different sorts of players, because Grider's obviously more of a interceptor, mark kick player, whereas in Ellinger's obviously a run and carry player.
It's more just a case of who's going to have the possessions back there, because like we know that Grider has been a distributor in the past.
Because I now look at the back line as it's named, at least, and think that probably the best distributor in terms of leg speed is probably Phoebe Monahan, which isn't really a natural fit for the role because she plays more of a lockdown.
She is their key defender. She is the last player in their defence.
Exactly. So I think it basically has to mean they're reshuffling the defence. To me, I mean, I can't say I know too much about Annalie McKee and Caitlin Wendland and whether they might be playing those roles. So I might quickly do some research on them. But, I mean, I think one of the bigger fantasy impacts for us might be we've actually got a defender who, or not a defender, what position's Wendland in the game?
That's a great
midfielder.
Question. Caitlin Wendland is a midfielder, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, either way, we've now got a potential player you could pick up.
If you were kind of desperate.
Yeah, if you want to try and get some money, no idea how she'll score, but who knows?
I wouldn't be going there. I think that what we've seen from rookies for Brisbane this year, for players who are actual rookies, I'm going to exclude Lily Postlethwaite from that kind of discussion, is it's a real struggle to get points. And they're often in and out of the side quite frequently. And, even the best of them in Charlotte Mullins has had some very up and down weeks, some high highs, and then some 3 of her 5 scores have been 30.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly one I'd be targeting. And in that instance, if you are looking for someone at 300k, I would be shopping in the players who have come down from higher prices down to 300k, a Rudy Tripodi, for example. In terms of what's happened at Collingwood,
just quickly before we move on from Brisbane, Caitlin Wendland coming from Central Districts averaged 6 tackles a game in the midfield. So is known as a pressure player. So does that translate? Who knows? But interesting to note.
Definitely interesting to note, but I would have said the same thing about Poppy Bolts.
Yeah.
She was a pressure midfielder and she's been, before being dropped, was a defender.
This is true.
Now, Bales, do you have many thoughts on Brisbane? Sorry, that was just Will and I just
no,
bit over Jade Ellinger.
No, that's all right. Nothing too much to add from my end. I don't have really too many of the players in my side, and I'm looking at, except probably for Ali Anderson, who I'll probably look at targeting once she's had that Lucy single tag next week.
Yes. Well, moving then on to Collingwood. Interestingly enough, the third week in a row under an injury cloud, Bree Davey has been named. My question for the pair of you is, do we expect Kathy Svark to go there with a tag?
Yes.
Yep, I would think so.
Yep, I agree with you. Save for the fact that I would have agreed even more, vociferously if we'd been talking about Svark tagging Jazz Garner in their game earlier in the year, and then that didn't happen, and as it turned out, the more effective tag was Bree Conan. So, yes, I think it is going to happen. That would be my prediction, but I can't say it with full chest. The other player that is hot on a lot of people's lips this week is Britt Bonici, fresh off her worst score of the year in that extremely weird and windy game between Essendon and Collingwood. So I'm in the situation where I'm holding her, and I really think that this is going to be a bad matchup for her. If you've got her still in your midfield, is this the week to upgrade?
I think it's a bit of a luxury trade, to be honest. I think there are probably still a few players like Bree Davey, I would probably say, are probably more pressing. Put it this way, she had her first poor game last week, and I think that scared a few people. And if it was anyone but Brisbane, I would have said, don't worry about it. Bonici will be fine. But it's Brisbane, which is why we're probably considering it a bit more. I think if your team's doing pretty well and Bonici's one of your lower tier players, go for it. But I think there's other players that are probably more priority for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think you're in the situation where if she were to serve up a, 60 to 80 point performance this week, she's at risk of falling below 1 million again. And I'm in the position where, as much as I have some players that I don't think are spectacular in my side, I don't expect them to lose nearly as much cash away from the players that I would otherwise want to be upgrading them to. And so that's my reason for trading out Britt Bonici this week. There's also part of me that knows there's a possibility she puts in a Jazz Garner gets tagged, but Ash Riddell still has a really good game type of performance. Because if you were to, make an analogy in this situation, Bonici is the Riddell of the pair of those players. and Riddell, managed to have a good enough score against them in each of their last 3 matchups, including this year. And so it might be a situation where Benici still does manage to get up to close to that 100 mark. I'm just of the opinion that it's more likely to be something in the 70s. And, Collingwood, as injured as they are, probably are going to struggle to keep a lot of the ball. And you're probably going to see some low scores across the board for the Pies.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that, if you've got rid of Davey, got rid of Phillips, don't have Ty Smith on field, and you've got rid of a few of those, I think Benici up is a good move. And if you can get one of those midfielders in that 1.3, 1.2 million range, it'd be a solid move.
Yep. Well, I'm in the situation where, I think it's Tiana Smith and Benici out for me, and then I'm downgrading to get about 370 cash and then paid. Moving along then to an upgraded game from Collingwood and Brisbane in Essendon and Geelong. Interestingly, there are some important names for Essendon that have been named on an extended bench, and then that's probably the main thing to come out of this. So out for Geelong is Mel Bragg, and then coming in on an extended bench, we've got Shelley Scott, Gabby Featherston, Rachel Kearns, and Liv Fuller. And then for Essendon, Jess Wushner is out, and then named on field is Mia Van Dyke. And then named on an extended bench, you've got Sophie van der Heuvel, Renee Tierney, and Danny Marshall. Importantly, Mia Bush, a very popular D6, has been named on the extended bench. And I have had a look in the past at what Essendon benches look like, and they pretty typically take the first 5 players named. And interestingly enough, Mia Bush has been named as the 6th player. And I think that the return of Sophie van der Heuvel means she is competing with Alex Morecambe for that kind of small to medium defender role this week. So that is a little concern for people. I would also say that Essendon, the way they've been named on the rest of the park, are absolutely ridiculous, and I would not be reading too much into it. I don't know if, Will, you've got it up in front of you, but G. Nanscorn is named as a forward pocket. Amber Clark has been named on the ball, and Steph Kane is off halfback.
Yeah, fantastic, honestly.
That is exactly how I predicted it. And I'm sure as a Geelong fan, you're sitting there going, yeah, well, perfect. If you name them there, they're all out of position. We're going to cruise to victory.
Look, put it this way. I'm still a bit worried because George Nanscorn, wonderful player. I think she's got at least a bag of 6 in her. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's hard to take much. We've known for a long time, to be completely honest, that the way the teams are named isn't always the most accurate. So
I think this is definitely a situation where it's not even close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then let's move along to other things that are not very close, which is the fact that Julia Crockett-Grills has been named on the ball.
I'm actually not as
Georgie
disagreeing
Prasparkas
on that one.
So yes, but Nina Morrison is named on a wing, and Beck Webster is off halfback. So in a full Geelong side, I don't think Julia Crockett-Grills starts as a midfielder. I think she might get some time.
Yes, I think that's fair enough. Actually, I think she'll definitely play through that midfield. But yes, I think there will be more likely to be the standard combination of Prasparkas, Morrison, and McDonald.
Yes, well, then that's a perfect segue into the conversation I think we really need to have this week, which is Georgie Prasparkas and Amy McDonald as trade-in targets for non-owners. They're very similarly priced at this stage. Amy McDonald's coming off a far better performance last week. If you were to predict who is going to score more points for the rest of the year, with Georgie being the higher ceiling but more tag magnet type of player over an Amy McDonald who is quite often more consistent, who are you going to predict as the high scorer for the rest of the season? Will, I'll go to you as the Geelong fan first.
Yeah, I still think it's Prasparkas. I think because she'll throw in a few massive scores in there that will just keep it above what I expect McDonald will do. But if you're looking for consistency, as you said, McDonald's probably still going to do you really well for probably slightly cheaper price across the season at least. And she can throw in a big score. She's got I think a career high of 127 or something like that.
She's definitely been someone that we've had kind of earmarked as a high ceiling player in previous seasons.
So to me, I think...
Yeah, and she's already had a 120 odd this year.
Yeah. I think you can't really go wrong with either of them. I think the worry would be for me is that Prasparkas will be much more highly owned, and you may get that 60-70 game from a tag in a few of the games coming up. But at the same time, it'll probably even out with a couple of 120s, 130s that, make it much of a muchness in terms of total points.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm also, just in terms of trading them in this week, I'm quite comfortable in saying that after what I've seen Essendon do against Anne Hatchard and then against Bree Davey, I'd expect Georgia Nanscorn to be some kind of stoppage tag on Georgie this week. Now, Georgie also scores a lot of points around the ground, so I not think it's going to be a player who can otherwise... I'm not expecting a 68 this week, let's put it this way. I'd expect it to be much closer to 100, maybe kind of a high 90s, low 100s this week. Because I think that Georgia Nanscorn is very, very good at kind of putting herself in front of players at stoppages and really limiting their upside. That may steer me towards actually picking Amy, because I don't think she sees a second of attack this week and sees much stoppage pressure at all. And she is definitely someone we've seen in the past can pretty comfortably tackle her way and kick her way to a big score. And you're saving 40k.
Yeah, and I think the thing about it is you hit the nail on the head there, which is Amy McDonald is almost never going to cop a tag. I think Morrison's probably the second tag option after Prasparkas. So I think you're pretty safe knowing that you're unlikely to get like a sub 80 score from an Amy McDonald, which might be the sort of security that you want around that price.
Yeah.
So I think
with the matchups coming up.
Yeah.
I think with the matchups coming up as well, we talked about it on the pod, but Essendon are a hard matchup for midfielders. And I think that is quite often because they're very good at extracting it out very quickly and getting the ball to the outside, really limiting those players who love repeat stoppages. And I think also they've shown that they're willing to put some stoppage attention into the kind of gun players. I think that, it's not necessarily going to deter me fully from trading in a McDonald or a Prasparkas this week, because I know that they've got Fremantle next week. They roll that into a game against Collingwood, where, again, I would expect McDonald to have a fair bit of spare time, as well as Prasparkas, and that might actually be a game where we see another ceiling and then finish off the season with Richmond and Hawthorn. So I really think that if you are considering trading targets this week at below 1.2 mil, so you haven't got the money for a Rowbottom, a Riddell, or a Parker, those three, I think targeting either of Georgie or McDonald is a good play.
Yeah, I think it's a good play. I'm Georgie as well. I'm just looking at like her scores, and I think a few people have been a little bit stressed about is Georgie going to be top 5 mid? I still think she's in my top 5. That last week she gave away 3 free kicks. One of them was ridiculous. It should have almost been holding the ball over a high tackle, and that puts her up near an 80 if it was a free kick for her. And then the other score, she got 300s in her first 4, and the only game she went under 100 was a pretty hard tag against Sydney, where she got an 89 at North Sydney Oval. So I'm pretty comfortable still bringing Georgie in. I'd love to bring her in this week. I'd be bringing her in if I had the extra 140k or whatever, and I'd also like Amy McDonald as well if I had the extra 90k, but unfortunately I don't. But I really do like both, but I think Georgie's going to be the one that scores most for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very close. I think that we too easily forget that the ceiling player for a lot of their career has actually been Amy McDonald, and I think she's got at least another 120 plus score in her. Particularly now that in the past she may have actually seen some attention. I don't think she's going to see any going forward. But I agree that Georgie is also a pretty safe bet to score well.
And McDonald's a better pod.
Moving along
as well.
McDonald is definitely the better pod. And if you are looking to make a play to kind of push you up in the rankings, if you're sitting in that range kind of around 1,000 or kind of around 500 and you're looking to make a push up in the second half of the year, I think you can do far worse than pick up Amy McDonald as a pod, who I'm pretty sure has very low ownership inside the top 100. Now, we've got the next game on the run sheet. We've got Richmond and the Suns. Now, for Richmond, in terms of the players that they've named, they've got on an extended bench. They've got Lily Pearce, Shannon Dankert, Megan Kiley back for her first game of the year, and then Lauren Caruso. And out is Sarah Hosking. So it's not been a great year for injuries for Richmond. And then for the Suns, you've got on an extended bench, Darcy Davies, who's this? Elise Barwick and Alana G coming in, and no outs named to date. Now, have either of you guys seen the article that went up kind of late this afternoon, which was an interview with the Gold Coast Suns coach about who Lucy Single was going to tag this week?
No, I haven't. No,
I missed that one.
Well, I would suggest you go and have a quick read.
I'm guessing this. I'm guessing the answer's not Mon Conti then.
Well, it's not that it's a slam dunk, Mon Conti, because in the corresponding fixture last year, the tag target was Eilish Sheeran.
Oh, no.
And there was some discussion, apparently, and this is, from the article, about whether or not some querying, or whether or not they run it back again this year. And then another name that was mentioned as a possible target for a tag, fresh off 2 great performances, is Greg. So what we all thought was a slam dunk, and I literally wasn't even thinking that there would be any other possibilities. The first time all year we have a coach up front about discussing who their players might tag, and all it seeks to do is to cast doubt in my mind, because I cannot afford Eilish Sheeran to get tagged when I don't have Hannah Priest.
I mean, for me, the error here is not having Hannah Priest, Liam.
Yeah, okay. Well, right, you've got bloody Ali Morfitt already, and now you're going to talk down to me about not having Hannah Priest. We both know that picking Hannah Priest to start the...
They're the only two I've got.
We both know that picking any player from the Saints this year that wasn't under price was a risk because of the Del Santo factor. But I'll give you credit for having, a better faith in the quality of Priest, given we've had her in the past. But in terms of this game, is that enough of a reason? If you're sitting there and you've got your size looking very good and you've got some cash to spend, you're kind of thinking about upgrading a Britt Bonici, looking to upgrade, maybe you're F5, maybe you've got a Chloe Malloy and you're looking to take her up to a Goldsworthy, or you've got an Eilish Sheeran there and you don't have Hannah Priest. Are you prioritising that over the other 2 upgrades?
I know that there was a talk about the potential tag off Mon Conti. I cannot see a world where Single doesn't tag Mon Conti. So I would be holding Eilish. And I think I'd be holding it even if she gets taken. Yes, she might put up a bad score, but I know a lot of people have said it's almost leave the defence alone once you've got sort of 5 good names back there, just because they can put floor scores up, but then they can fight with good scores. And Sheeran's been pretty consistent this year, scoring between, 59 and 77. So getting solid scores. I guess, if you had nothing to do and you've got the money there, going Sheeran to Priest is a move that you could definitely look at, or even a Sheeran to a Carney if you jumped off of her or didn't start with her. That could be a play if you had no other issues. I just think that I'd probably do another trade elsewhere, I think.
Interesting. Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I tend to agree with Bales that I'd be staggered if they didn't tag Mon Conti. It just seems like such an obvious one. She gives so much drive for Richmond that I know Sheeran's a fantastic player, but even with her ability to run off half back, I just don't see her having the same impact as a Mon Conti. So I'd be doubly disappointed if she did go to Eilish Sheeran, put it that way. I think if you are trading out Sheeran, you're probably trading out a player that isn't a priority just because she may have a tag, not even guaranteed to have a tag. So I would probably be looking elsewhere.
Yeah. I think that there is a world where you can make the argument, irrespective of tag, that in trading out Sheeran, you're bringing in, and to bring in Priest, and probably only Priest, you're bringing in the number one player in their line.
Yeah. I think if you're right, if you're not going all the way up with Sheeran at the moment, I don't think it's really that important.
Advisable.
Yeah.
But if we did get advance word, let's say we're going into Saturday and you do actually have some advance word about the fact that Sheeran is the one who'll see the tag, I can't begrudge you for doing it, because it was a 37 that she scored in this matchup last year when she saw the single tag. And that included a game with 5 tackles as well. So she got tagged hard, and she gave away 4 free kicks, which is just classic Sheeran areas.
I guess when you look at it, you could, if you keep Sheeran and she get to 37 again, I think that the defenders you're bringing in, if it's not Hannah Priest, I think that's probably the only way. If you're going only up, you're only probably you might only gain 30 points. Whereas if you hold a Bree Davey or Ty Smith and you can get a Parker or Blackburn or Derrick or something, they go 130, that's going to cost you a lot more. So that's probably another thing to note for coaches looking at that.
I definitely agree with you there, but unfortunately, that's I can only spread the good word, and the good word being that we now don't get to sleep as soundly at night, because I also have been very comfortable in saying that Mon Conti is not someone you should be trading in this week, because she will see the Lucy Single tag, and I think that if you were to ask who might be, the one player that Lucy Single is built to stop, and that is probably Mon Con. If you were to get any word that that wasn't to happen, is that a possibility? Is trading in a Mon Conti fresh off a 120 odd on the weekend against Fremantle a possibility? Because if my memory serves correctly, they don't actually have a bad run coming up either. Actually, no, that's not true. They've got the Cats the week after.
They got.
Oh, sorry,
Essendon.
not the Cats. Sorry, not the Cats. They got
Essendon. Then they've got Hawthorn, Geelong, and then they finish off with Collingwood. So it's been very good this year. She's 300s in his first 5, 94 against the Crows, and 84 against Giants with a listed tag. So if there was word that she wasn't going to get the tag, then you could definitely look at it, because she's been very consistent. But I'd be a bit. I still think she'll get it. But if you heard that she didn't, I think that she's definitely an option that you could consider.
Yeah. Interestingly as well, I think this might be just a storyline to kind of say for the off-season. Just having a look back, each of both of the last 3 seasons, Mon Conti has averaged or been around that 10% market share percentage. She's never really broken out as a fantasy player, though. Notwithstanding the fact that I reckon anyone who gets above that 10% threshold has, potential to be a premium mid or a premium player. Is it something that, is it a case of she's never going to improve? Is there something in the game plan that Richmond need to unlock to make her a good fantasy scorer? Because she dominates the ball and fantasy scoring in that team at Richmond in a way that you would expect her to see more points.
I think something that a lot of people do forget is she's still 23.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
There's still a fair bit of development to go.
But you've also got to remember, Elise Parker is the same age.
Oh, for sure. But I think they're different sorts of players, where Parker being a different sort of contested player probably lends itself more to fantasy point getting, whereas I think for Moncon, the thing about her is the reason she's so good is because she's super good at basically getting out of it. And we've had this discussion before a few times, possibly on the pod, possibly just while we're watching the game. One of the reasons she probably isn't an elite scorer is because she doesn't really get many marks and tackles compared to other players, because what she is really, really good at is handball receives. The Richmond players love giving it to her. She gets out of trouble and is a fantastic kick going.
It's a bit like Dusty.
And exactly. And it's one of the reasons why she'll probably have a season where it all comes together and averages well over 100. But it's not that unfathomable that she will always be a 90 averaging midfielder despite being one of the best in the competitions.
Yeah, I think to kind of piggyback off the back of that, I actually would say that the biggest issue is that she doesn't get a lot of repeat possessions in kicking chains, and that's because I think that her movement skills are so good, her teammates don't know where she's going, which I actually think is a legitimate thing. Like, you're never 100% sure where she's going to exit the stoppage, and that makes it difficult for players to set up around her so that she can get those kind of kick, and then she's in the next kick in the kicking chain. It's almost like she's actually going a little too fast and moving a little too differently. But look, she scored well in the last game, and it was a great matchup, and she's got a tough one this week potentially. But if you heard word of a single tag not being there, then I can't begrudge picking her. And now, moving along to the final game of the round, we've got Fremantle and North Melbourne. In the ins and outs, there's only one player who's actually been named out so far, and that's Sarah Wheelstra out for Fremantle. They've named Ed Antonio, Talia Mulder, Ariana Hetherington, and Michaela Hyde. And then North Melbourne have named in on an extended bench Neve Martin, Lucy Burke, and Hannah Bowie. For this game, I think there are a few interesting storylines. For the Kangaroos, I say I'm probably going to expect the same as we've seen in every game this year outside of GWS, which is probably a lot of high score. It'll be quite high scoring. We're probably going to see a fair few goals from Shearlaw, Randall, and King, and then a pretty dominating midfield performance from the combination of Garner, Riddell, King, and Jenna Bruton. I don't think I expect to see anything different from the Kangaroos this week. Now, unless anyone disagrees with me, I think the real interesting side here is Fremantle, because I don't understand them. And they're interesting in one respect, and they're also frustrating. Can we, in any way, shape, or form, predict... Oh, actually, Will has just dropped off as well. Bales, I'll ask you. They've named Hayley Miller, Anne Stannett, and Dana East in the midfield. Would you be confident saying that will be the kind of main midfield rotation for this game?
No. No, you can't. You've said it. You can't predict really what Freo are doing at the moment. Because I would be keen on bringing I've looked at Meg Kaufman, bring her in my forward line for Aaron Phillips this week. But she's in my forward line. I brought her in last week. I'd seen her live in that fourth quarter against Essendon, which was her best quarter of the game with Bowers off the field. Yeah.
I was like, that is someone that we've seen go well in previous weeks. And she dipped a little bit with Bowers back in playing full-time minutes, and then she goes out, she has her best quarter. She's cheap, she's like 770 odd K. Sits at full forward for a quarter in the game the week after. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't. And you said it as well on the pod, the tackle numbers, it's fallen off of a cliff for all of Freo. Week one, I'm looking at Kaufman's numbers. She had 12 and 14 in the first 2 weeks, and that 12 in round one was only from 58%. In the last 3 weeks, 2, 5, and 2. We know that she tackles a lot, and I want to bring her in because I think she can be a player that can go at 90 just with the tackle numbers and playing midfield, but I don't know what role she's going to play. And the concerning thing is, does Hayley Miller maybe go to a Garner, and do a run with roll with her?
That was going to be my... She didn't go with a run with roll on Conti last week.
Yeah.
That was actually a little bit of Ange Stannett, and not a very good job at it either.
Yeah, and Ange Stannett's been so good this season, playing as that high half forward and getting up the ground, almost playing as an extra midfielder. And you'd think that they'd play like Hayley Miller, Kaufman, and maybe an O'Sullivan or Dana East or someone in there. But
Dana East, absolutely. They've got the midfield bodies to kind of put in there, and they've got a whole bunch of players who played as midfielders as juniors. Pip Seth is an example. She's not named in this side, but is someone who's they've got midfielders. The choice to put Ange Stannett in there, it basically changed her position for the second time in 5 games, is baffling.
Yeah.
But again, it really does make predicting fantasy scores impossible for them this week. Outside of, I'd say, maybe only Anya Tighe, and this is not the matchup to bring her in either.
Yeah. I'm probably going to watch for a week or what's happening at Freo if they do change back. They did win last week, so probably not.
That made even less sense. They look terrible structurally. They were never in the right spot, and yet they still managed to win. They allowed Kate Dempsey, a winger, to look like the best player on the park in the first half. The number of times Fremantle got the ball and they just had nobody to kick it to going forward if Anya Tighe wasn't there because they had, Hayley Miller sitting at full forward, or they had an entire quarter of Megan Kaufman sitting at full forward. They are an unfathomable side. I think the only flag on Garner this week is possibility of seeing the same kind of tag from Hayley Miller that Maddie Press-Parker saw.
Yeah.
That's probably the main thing I'd be concerned about. And, I'd like to be, if you're in a situation where you can at least have a loop with someone else in the round, I wouldn't be expecting 150.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't either. I think she'll go all right, but yeah, not probably that ceiling score. That would be, the one thing, a bit of a flag there. Does Jazz kind of still go at the top of the captains for you this week, mate? She's still up there?
She's still up there, yes. She's still at the top for me at the moment, but it's not kind of extremely high.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of, it's not 130 plus.
Yeah, it's probably maybe a little bit less this week. Is that I've seen it. Right. I've half considered it. I'm probably not going to do it. I've considered going Garner down to a Prasparkas, for example, to just get a few 100K, which would allow me to go a Phillips up to someone like a Goldsworthy. That's something I've considered. I don't know if that is anything you'd recommend for other people out there. I couldn't, because she could just go 150 when you're going to get rid of her. Like, look what happened to Kate Hoare, and I didn't expect Kate Hoare to go over 110, let alone 140.
You can't be getting rid of players who've got that kind of ceiling and have shown it at multiple points this season. Which also takes us now to a few. We've got a lot of questions, and apologise if we don't get to all of them. But in terms of some of the most interesting ones, I think we're now talking in the range of the most important ones this week, which is if you're sitting there, you're looking to upgrade a Benici, you've got the options of trading in each of Ash Riddell. You've also got Elise Parker, and you've also got Charlie Rowbottom. In what order would you be trading them in this week?
I still have Rowbottom number one. I think I saw her live last week, and she was fantastic. Like, again, racking up the tackles, getting the touches. She gave away 4 free kicks as well, which was a few of them were probably a little bit clumsy. And on another day, she doesn't give all those away, and that's a 140 if she doesn't give those away. She was fantastic. I just really can't praise her enough. I've loved watching her since I've owned her. Even when I didn't own her, she was. It was hard to watch because she was so good. Second, I'd have Elise Parker just for the run coming up and the fact she doesn't come off the ground. Like the last 4 games, the only time she's been off was when she was injured against Richmond. That's it. She stays on the ground the whole time, and the run. And I feel bad putting Ash Riddell at 3 because she's been so good, and she's, again, one of those real good pod options in the midfield. Never going to get tagged with Jazz Garner there. Just the low time on ground still is, you mentioned pre-season was a bit baffling last year, and it's sort of continued a little bit again, playing really in the 70s, when I would imagine that she probably could play around the mid-80s. But, yeah.
I also just think it's a situation where if you look at what Garner's time on ground is, it has also been, it's not been as low, but it's also been lower than you would expect for a player who's, put together 7 seasons of pre-season and has also been, a pretty contested high endurance player for a few seasons in a row now. So if you were to ask, it might be just a situation where they're looking to conserve bodies for what I'm almost certain will be a final series.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's an outrageous choice. But yeah, in terms of my rankings, I have ummed and ahed about this for a long time. I actually think trading in this week, it's probably Parker 1.
Yeah, and
then it's Riddell 2, and then it's Rowbottom 3.
Okay.
Because Rowbottom next week has the matchup against Brisbane. And so it's not a great matchup this week. It's a horrendous matchup the week after.
Yeah.
It's the worst matchup you can have for any position. And, it's not as so bad as you're going to trade her out. I think that we've seen that hyper contested, you can't tackle me to the ground style really does stop her from having those pretty bad floor scores. I do think she becomes a very difficult player to tag to a 60. So I think that she insulates herself from that Georgie Prasparka style of 60 or 70. But I don't know if it's ceiling scores for each of the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. It's a good call. I wouldn't begrudge anyone going Parker over Rowbottom, and against three great players that are all you're hoping going to go 100 plus the rest of the year. You almost can't make a wrong decision in terms of who you get in, even though you still sort of can in a way because one could go down a lot.
You definitely can make a. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that these are definitely players to be targeting. It's just, push comes to shove. This is my order of preference. But also, I cannot claim to be absolutely certain on that. And it's something that I've ummed and ahed on all week.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same. If I didn't have Rowbottom already, I'd be umming and ahhing between her and Parker. So if you're going for the run, it's definitely Parker.
Yeah. All right. So I think then that was one question that had actually popped up in a few different places. Now, here's another one for you. She's one of the big name outs for this week. And you've got Paxi. She's now out. Who are the best upgrade or who are the best forward targets at below 940K?
Yeah, again, this is one I've been struggling with. I think Goldsworthy's right up there. We've seen how good she's been, and I think she's going to push those top five. She doesn't, again, similar to Parker, doesn't come off the ground. Sabrina Frederick is also a name there that is to just keep an eye on it. She's a bit expensive probably for my liking, but has been better in the ruck. I'm just only mentioning her name because she's been good. I'd be definitely going Goldsworthy over her if you've got that. You've mentioned Nicola Barr, who I'm a fan of as well, has been pretty consistent this year and, as Will said, finally playing a good role. Going down, I think, and then probably the two that I'd be keen to see what you thought, because I think we've said Randall, Kaufman, Harris, players like that are probably not at this stage, is Deanna Berry and Jessie Wardlaw are probably the two. I like Berry playing in that midfield, and Wardlaw's been one that's playing more in the ruck. But is it Erin McKinnon is back for Saints?
Erin McKinnon is back, but they've also dropped Simone Nolder this week. So, yeah, look, I think that I would prefer Deanna Berry just because I definitely think there's a world where Jessie Wardlaw is, in times where things are going poorly structurally up forward for St Kilda, she'll be tasked with a role to structure up a little bit more.
Yep.
And I'm just naturally drawn away from key forwards as higher scoring players. I do think, though, that this week is a good matchup because I don't know if anyone's going to be able to run around the ground with her if she's playing in the ruck. But I also think that Erin McKinnon is someone who, has the capability as a full-time ruck. We've seen her do it before at GWS. So it's certainly an option, but I think I prefer the role of Dee Berry. She was a little bit up and down on the weekend, but it kind of quarter to quarter, but she definitely looked like she's a full-time player in there. And it certainly looks like Kirsty Lamb has made way for that to happen. The other two names that are probably worthwhile thinking about are Gabby Newton at 770K and then Haneen Zarika at 751. I think Gabby Newton looked like she'd made a pretty full-time move to defence in that game against St Kilda. So she, off the top of my head, I think she took all the kick-ins. And she's someone who has gone to pick one. The Western Bulldogs have constantly tinkered for her best position. Just given she's in that kind of Montana Ham-esque frame. And she had, I think, her highest score of the year on the weekend.
89.
An 89.
Yep, 9 marks as well.
She looked really good. And 9 marks, took a whole bunch of kick-ins. I'd love to see that tackle number a little higher. But on the whole, I think she's definitely a name that I'd probably have above Wardlaw at this stage.
But you'd still prefer Berry, though.
I would still prefer Berry at this stage, but it's just disappointing that we don't have Gabby Newton actually named as a defender because that would be a fascinating play at her price.
Yeah.
All right, so I think those. So yeah, I'm definitely obviously a big fan of Barr. It goes without saying. I don't know if I like Lucy Single scoring for each of the next 2 weeks. I'm not so big on Sabs Frederick just for her run the next couple of games. Rucks for Collingwood, they've got the matchup against Brisbane Lions, which is less than ideal. And then they roll into Carlton, so that's Moody and Good. and then into Geelong.
Yeah.
So I'm not, on board with Saz Frederick as much. The ruck who's named as a forward, who I am on board with, is Emma King. I think that she is someone who, if you forgive her for a 66 on the weekend in a game where typically she's taken, 5 to 7 marks a game, she had 1, and that was, I was going to say, in large part due to the weather.
Yeah.
She is someone who has been taking more ruck contests, has averaged far more hit-outs this year than she has in other years with when Kim Rennie has been in the side. So she's another player at 916k who has a good scoring matchup this week against what's a pretty soft Fremantle side.
Yep, yeah, I like it, yeah.
It's definitely somewhere where you can go if you are looking for a pod. Now, let's just go through. There are unfortunately a lot of questions, and I'm cognizant that we've been going for quite a long time now. Okay, let's quickly reload and see what other ones pop up when I do.
Is Fitzgerald the pick of the rookies this week, do you think?
Yeah, Kira Fitzgerald with Kez Peterson out is definitely the pick this week. She's going to have I'm pretty sure she got the lowest break even of the week. And a good matchup. Like we saw that, Western Bulldogs pretty easy to play against, and they'll be inaccurate with their kicking. So
and cash gen tight. I think it's good. I think Bush to Fitzgerald's going to be a pretty popular move this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of any other questions, there's one here asking about Zarika. Yeah, I kind of mentioned her name then, but we didn't really discuss her much at all. Do we reckon she holds that midfield role? And do you think that the scoring holds up? Because that was her highest score of all time on the weekend with her 80-odd.
Yeah, she looked good, did a good job on Jazz Garner. I think someone put up, Jane in our Discord chat, and that put up the CBAs, and I think she only had like 11% or something, or a low number. So I'm a bit wary of targeting a player like that's had one big score. I know that she looked good last week, but who's to say that she doesn't sort of tag anyone this week and go more to forward and score a 40. So I'm probably not going to go there. I think you'd almost rather take the punt on Gabby Newton for what's that 19k more, and I think Dee Berry as well is probably the pick there.
Yeah, I would be taking a stab on either of those over Zarika. I think we know that she's talented and she is a good pressure player, but her points per minute was, I think, close to half a point per minute per game better than her highest ever previously. So that screams a bit of an out-of-the-box game for me.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, and then I think unfortunately, here's actually a good one to end on this week. Who's the better player to trade this week? Is it Matilda Schultz or Tiana Smith?
Ooh. Again, probably depending who you're getting up to. If you're going Schultz to Edmonds, and then if it's Ty Smith to Dowrick, I think you're going Ty Smith to Dowrick just for this week, because Schultz has got a decent matchup, which you probably wouldn't think Ali Morfitt's a good matchup, but she is.
No.
So
Ali Morfitt gives away free kicks like they're going out of fashion, and does not apply defensive pressure in the marking contest. Yeah. If she's not there, she's really not there. She's going to allow you to do your own thing.
Yeah, like last week for Morfitt was a good week. She only gave away one free kick, but before that, 4, 3, 4, and 7. So she's scoring that well with all these free kicks. So I think. I think it's...
Here's something for you. She has the most clangers in the competition at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that should give you an idea of the type of player that she is. But yes, I think that I agree with you. I think it's Tiana Smith out. I think that the difference between Tiana Smith as an M5 is, to the player you could get up to. If you bring in, even if you're trying to get to an Amy McDonald, I think the difference in their scoring could be 40 plus points versus... I think Matilda Schultz versus Morfitt, it's probably going to be 80 and 100. It's going to be 20 points difference this week.
Yeah.
All right. I've realised now I've been messaged and been told that we probably do need to discuss just quickly, which is who are the best kind of 300 to 400k players to trade in this week. I think we've already named the number one target, and that's Kira Fitzgerald. I think you can also take a punt on Charlie Wicksteed. She has looked good when she's actually been given the time on ground. I don't know about you, Bale.
Yeah,
if you've had a look
I know that
around at the
I know
moment.
that JS in our Discord chats, he's always disappointed, saying that he thinks Wicksteed should be getting a lot more game time. And I agree with that. I think she should be getting more game time, which could start rising after having some good moments last week. So she's one. There's a lot of names that have dropped a lot of cash that you sort of look at and you think, could you take almost a punt on someone like that? Like Fowler's not dropped a lot, but she's obviously was playing that backup rut. She's another one I looked at. I looked at a few names that have, like, again, as I said, dropped cash. Like you've got like Tess Craven is there, dropped to over 200k, and then you've got you obviously mentioned McCoy before, but I wouldn't be going there after that. And then you've also got, I think, Sophie Casey from Collingwood as well. But then it's like they've dropped so much. It's for a reason. So do you want to be jumping on someone that's dropped on? Then Ruby Tripodi is probably the other one. I don't know if you're a fan of any of those ones there.
Yeah, so Tripodi, I really don't mind. I think taking a punt on, what's her name, from Collingwood.
Casey. No, Erica Fowler, yeah.
Erica Fowler. There are definitely worse players to take a punt on. I think if you haven't got Izzy Huntington already, I think she's coming into the good bit of her schedule now. She's got a game against West Coast where we know that there can be some pretty decent scores, and I do actually back her in to have a bag of goals at some point, and then she's got St Kilda, and then follows that up with a game against Carlton. So I think that's not a bad player to be targeting. I also think that there are, a bunch of names that you could be trading in that are very, very cheap at that 300k level. So players that you've probably, you could have owned in the past if we were playing as a rookie. Nell Morris-Dalton is 300k. And I think she actually had a bag of goals in the first couple of games and then really hasn't done much since then. So she's probably due for some. If you were to ask me, I don't think it's the worst option. We've already kind of had a discussion about Cambridge McCormick. I think you would do that with the expectation that you might not be getting many points. I don't think Cambridge is going to be making much cash unless she's in a role where she's back to being a full-time ruck. In terms of other positions, unfortunately, I had it filtered just for forwards. Interesting one here as well. Cheyenne Hammond is 372k. She's someone who can score 40s, and she's got a couple of good matchups on the horizon. Now, Dana Finn played as an intercept defender in the game against St Kilda. I think that she might not hold her spot, is my query, if Karen Peterson is to come back into the side.
Yep.
Versus Kira Fitzgerald, who looked really, really good. I wouldn't be going... well, actually, interestingly enough, Sachi Syme has been named again. She's someone who you could definitely be trading in. She had a 42 against Geelong, which was the last game she played, and then got dropped quite inexplicably, if you ask me. She's at a very low... she's only at 300k because she had a 6 in 58% game time in round 2 against Brisbane. But if you're going to bank on a player who, again, has good points per minute when they're given enough time on the ground, it's probably Syme and Wicksteed.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's enough of the names for the time being. I could be scrolling through this list for quite a while, and I'm cognizant that that's now the nice hour and 45-minute mark, so a bumper episode. But I think then we've probably had a nice long chat now that Will joined us as well. Before we all jump off, who are your trades and who's your current captain this week?
So trades is probably the good question of the week for me. I haven't been sold on really.
I get the feeling you're not very settled.
No, I'm sort of just. It's like going to sleep and just can't get comfortable. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of trades, but they make the most sense. So going Mia Bush down to Kiara Fitzgerald, going Erin Phillips up to Dee Berry, and then going Bree Davey up to Abby Dowrick. The reason I sort of feel unsettled still is the fact that I still don't own any of Bonnie Toogood or Kate Hoare. I've still got probably I want to go Schultz up to Edmonds or Morford at some point in the near future. I've still got Ty Smith on field. Tanya Kennedy was good last week, but can she keep that going, or is she going to drop a bad score where I'm going to have to trade her? So and then not much cash gen. So I'm sort of just I was happy with my team a few weeks ago, but getting Garner is almost it's made life a bit tougher than what I thought. So I don't know what your opinions are on those trades, but that's currently what I've settled on, and they probably make the most sense at this stage.
Yeah, look, I don't mind the combination of Dowrick and Berry as trade-ins. I do think that Phillips is a must-trade. And, yeah, you're going to have to make some tough choices in the coming few weeks, or at least hope that someone like a Tanya Kennedy can kind of maintain that kind of mid to high 60s scores for you so that she's not too much of a liability. In terms of my trades this week, I am going one of either of the sets of trades. So, funnily enough, I'm actually also trading at Erin Phillips this week, but she was not on field for me last week. I made the call that I thought Brianna Davey was going to lose too much cash, so I traded Davey out and put Tiana Smith on field instead, and that allowed me to put Erin Phillips on the bench for a week and at least get a chance to stream her if she, say, had a score in the 30s, and I wouldn't have to then take it.
Yeah.
So she's going down most likely to a Wick Steed, possibly even to just a 300k basement player, maybe a Sachi Syme this week. And then I am doing either of both Benici and Tiana Smith out and bringing in Riddell and Dowrick or Parker and McDonald.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, I'd love to be doing moves like that. That's why I said in my position, I half looked at bloody Garner out, but I cannot bring myself to trading Garner out.
All right. Yep. It's a really tough one, and you take a bold call, but you might be able to bank close to 300k.
Yeah. Don't tempt me.
Well, look, I'd love to give you some better advice, but I would just probably tie your brain in even more knots than you already are.
Yeah.
And on that fun note, we're probably going to end it up here for this evening. Thank you, everyone, for coming along to listen. I always appreciate coming on to have these chats, and I hope everyone else who's out there listening is doing the same.
Hopefully,
Bales.
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully,
before I run off,
get you to jump on tomorrow afternoon as well. Be nice. Obviously, you got work and stuff, but see how we go with that.
Work commitment's going all right. I've got a bit of a deadline, but I should be able to make it on for at least part of it tomorrow night. So hopefully that's on the cards. Bales, before we jump off, where can people find you out in the world?
You can find me in Adelaide, relaxing, watch some footy, and on Twitter and Instagram at BalesDT, and YouTube at Trudy Bales. Trudy Bales HD on YouTube. I got that right. Bloody old, almost stuffing that up there. Live tomorrow as well. Pre-lockout chat, so make sure you guys tune in for that. And thanks once again for having me, Lee. It's been good fun.
Yeah, no, not a problem. And thanks for coming on. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this evening. All things going well with the audio when I download it. This should also be up on our podcast feed tomorrow. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.